There was one additional question. I think we have quite a few people on the program that are interested in the business analytics, which is our latest concentration. Someone asked about software background and what we were interested in. What I would say is that if you have been exposed to software, particularly in the analytics side, like Python or Tableau, or maybe even some machine learning, that will provide you with a background that will enable you to learn that while you're in the business analytics program. But as with the marketing and management field and statistics, we begin by assuming that you have a very limited background, and we will teach you all of those. In fact, the coursework, and if you want specifics more than I can provide today, you may want to talk to me individually or Dr. Afuso, but you'll be exposed in the business analytics curriculum to Python, Tableau, data robot, machine learning, maybe some stata, and so forth. So you have separate coursework that focuses on that, and you're going to have separate and unique individuals that are global scholars. So if you have that background, then in fact it will help you. But if you don't have that background, then you will learn that while you're in the program. Well, we're going to talk about the research proposal. I think most of you know that in fact we do not require the GMAT. A lot of people ask me why we don't require the GMAT. We learned very early that the GMAT is really not a good predictor of success in our program. And so when I was designing the Kennesaw program years ago, which was, as I recall, the second program to be started like this in the non-traditional kind of format, we did some work and we proposed that this writing workshop would perhaps be a better way to screen individuals and to determine if they would be successful in a PhD type program. We learned that it was. So we implemented that, and it has become a very successful tool for determining if people are really serious, but also being a tool for exposing them to a lot of the things that they'll be involved in while in the program, as well as in conducting their own research later on as they apply the skills and the knowledge that they have learned in the program. And so we expose them to the things that they're doing, and we prepare them to do that. We're going to spend probably a couple of hours today. We may spend a little bit more. If you have other things that you need to do, then of course this will be available later on. It will be recorded, and I, as well as the other faculty and other students, will be available for you to ask questions to them. So we're going to talk about what this writing workshop is, but I have a few things before that to share with you specifics about our program. So we're going to give you a little bit more of an overview. We've given you a student perspective and a couple of faculty perspectives, but we want to talk about our PhD program because we're very proud of it, and we've had a lot of success in this program. We're going to talk a little bit about what scholarly research is. That is the core of the writing assignment, the writing proposal. It's also a core element in the entire PhD program, not just our PhD program, but all PhD programs. I'm going to explain to you and try to answer your questions about the writing assignment, and then to the extent possible, I'll try to answer the questions that you may have. You've seen some of this before. You did not get an opportunity to meet Dr. Pennywell. She had another commitment today. She's the director of our graduate studies in the Mitchell College of Business. You heard a little bit towards the end from Mickey Smith. Mickey is the assistant director. His area of expertise is management. He has previous experience in both traditional and non-traditional doctoral programs. And of course, then we've got Dr. Gillis, Bill Gillis, who's chair of management and works very closely He has the reputation as being the toughest professor in the program. It's not that the others are not tough, but he really has heavy assignments, but he delivers them in a way that students learn to like that. And so he's an excellent member, as are all the faculty members from South Alabama, in terms of supporting doctoral students and helping them to get through the program. So, as you know, it's a 3-year program. It's a weekend doctoral program. We have about 20% of our students who graduate actually in 3 years. The reason that others don't graduate is due to the fact that you really have to be finished in less than 3 years with your doctoral research. That means instead of the 3rd year being the end in May of 3 years, which will be May 2024 for you individuals, you really have to be finished by February. Another 30, 40, perhaps even as much as 50% of the people actually finish by May, the 3rd year out, but they don't finish in time to jump through all the hurdles required by the university, because a hurdle is a requirement such as the formatting of your dissertation and completing all the little details to graduate. So the average is about 3.5 years for completion of about 80% of the people, but it is still, for those of you who have some extra time, you can in fact finish exactly on 3 years and graduate 3 years. The group that's incoming now is 9 years, so we've had experience with 8 cohorts here, and it starts in May of 2021. And as we mentioned earlier, we've got concentrations in management, which was the first, and then we added marketing 5 years ago when I arrived, and now we're adding business analytics. And we anticipate that we will admit somewhere between 8 and 10 individuals in each area. Why should you come here? Well, we have world-class faculty, individuals that have been successful in both teaching and in research, and in areas where we can't have expertise in every area, but where we do not have that expertise, we hire global scholars, and that is unique for most traditional, for non-traditional programs. I recognized early on when I started the program at Kennesaw that we needed some outside expertise, and so we started it there, and now we've continued it down here. You will be pursuing what we refer to as a research doctorate. A research doctorate is defined by the accreditation agency that accredits business programs. And these kind of programs are recognized throughout the U.S. In fact, we have had tremendous response this year. We've had over 200 inquiries about our program. So you may be wondering how South Alabama became recognized like this. Well, they became recognized because we have a high quality program that has been very successful in placing our students. But we've also sent our students to conferences and other opportunities where they have a chance to meet other faculty and to meet other students and develop capabilities that ensure that our program is the kind of program that they were interested in when they entered our program, as well as what will prepare them for a future career if they choose to in fact become an academic and teach at the university level, or whether some of our students continue in industry. As an example, many of the students will have had 10 or 15 years with a company. They want to stay with that company until they vest in a retirement program, or they build up retirement to a level where they feel comfortable making a transition. Those individuals are still prepared with a PhD. The important thing, though, if you don't make the immediate transition into a university position, is that you continue to engage in the research and academic kinds of activities, so that when you decide to make that transition, that you will have sharp skills, updated skills, and we'll be glad to work with you to do that. What is a research doctorate? Well, A research doctorate is a program, a degree program that is primarily based on theory. It's not only based on theory, but it's based on teaching you how to test theory. One of the things that we share with individuals who are in the program, and I'm glad to share with you now, is that in a master's degree program, what we would be teaching you is best practices so that you can understand what those practices are and how to apply them. When you get in a doctoral program and when you move to that doctoral program, you're going to be testing theories that will help you to develop new best practices. So the theory-driven research doctorate helps you to learn how to explain and to predict outcomes and test theories. Theories that are based on hypotheses that you will test not only in your program, but when you get out. A lot of people think that theory is something strange. Theory is not really strange. In fact, we do that every day. For example, if you are taking a weekend visit somewhere else, which we don't do as often these days, but anyway, if you were driving down the highway and you see someone, a law enforcement individual who's maybe using radar, what do? Well, you automatically slow down because you've learned over time that the theory underlying that decision is that if you're 5 miles over the speed limit, then the law enforcement individual may not stop you, depending upon how they feel that day. At the same time, if you're 10 miles over, then in fact, you might get ticketed. So the theory that you're operating on there is that you understand what you're encountering, but you make adjustments, so you make decisions based on what your fundamental knowledge is about the theory of whether they decide to stop you. You also have theories about how much you can eat and how much you need to sleep and how you interact with your significant others. And those theories are everyday kind of theories. Those are not typically the theories, though, that we work with in terms of when you're in the program. You learn about the importance of in fact, decision making. If you're a family business or if you're involved in a family business, how does that differ from a corporate environment? If you're working in teams, then what are the things that you learn about to be most successful in team building and successfully finishing team assignments? If you're in the marketing field, then you're going to learn about theories that help you to develop the most effective social media strategies. So a research doctorate is where you identify a theory that someone else has developed before, and the result of your interest and your desire to learn about it is to actually gather data and test that theory. So you apply theory, you do develop a little theory, but mostly we're looking at the application of theory when you're in fact in your doctoral program. What we do, though, prepare you for is that if you eventually want to develop some theory, that you will have the skills and the knowledge to do that. What very often happens is that you will take an existing theory and you will extend it so that you can, in fact, make a unique additional contribution. And as I said earlier, to perhaps even develop some best practices about how to make the best decisions within the environment that you'll be working. So what we're preparing you for, and working with you to do is to ultimately make a mid-career transition to university level teaching and perhaps even consulting. Some of the individuals decide that they want to continue working, as I said, and they may in fact pursue part-time assignments, teaching on a part-time basis. Other individuals want to go into a situation where they're primarily teaching, but even though you are primarily teaching at the university level, these days you must do research, you must in fact publish. And so you will have the skills from attending a program and graduating from a program like ours that will enable you to be successful as a teacher, as a researcher, as a publisher, as a speaker, or as a consultant? Well, let's give you an example. Here's a topic that I worked on with one of my former doctoral students. Increasingly, what we see not only here in the US, but in many other countries, we see that older workers now have younger supervisors. In a work environment that sometimes, more often than perhaps we'd like, raises a conflict, because traditionally, an older worker was viewed based on their tenure and their knowledge that they've gained over a number of years, was viewed as the individual that should be the manager or the leader. But increasingly, we have younger individuals who have in fact been successful in their academic programs, or they've earned an MBA. And so now we have situations where you have individuals who are younger managing older individuals. In fact, if you look at me, I can tell you I've had lots of managers who have in fact been younger than me, but I'm still running very fast as I can. So the phenomenon of an older worker with a younger supervisor is a situation that we studied in that area. What did we study? We studied the expectations that individuals had of their manager, whether they had different expectations for younger supervisors or older supervisors. How did that influence their perceptions of the actual performance of a manager? And ultimately, how did it lead to perhaps what we call commitment and turnover? Commitment is an area in management, but we also use it in the marketing and sales area for sales management. What is the extent to which an employee is committed to their organization? We're interested in highly committed individuals because they're more productive and they help the company to increase the likelihood of successful sales and successful profits. They also reduce the likelihood that they'll be searching for another job, because one of the challenges in managing a business is keeping your good employees. And in order to keep your good employees, you want to ensure that you're providing an environment that enables individuals to remain and be successful. So when you talk about researching an area like this, one of the things you have to do is you have to start out and say, well, if you're going to focus on older and younger workers, well, how do you define that? When I'm teaching this topic, I often ask individuals, and I say, well, how would you define that? And I ask them to talk about it. And of course, they're reluctant because they want to say an older individual is 50 or older, or maybe 40 or older. And they look at me and, they say, well, I better not say an older worker is, 50, because that might be viewed as an insult by Dr. Hare. But no, you have to decide. And that's not the easiest thing, because it varies. It could be a chronological measure of your age. But we also know, I'm sure all of you know, some individuals that are old when they're 20 or old when they're 30. So you have to identify what you mean by a definition of an older or a younger supervisor and decide how you're going to actually measure it. And then once you've decided answers to those questions, then how do you collect the data? By the way, what we ended up doing in this particular research project is that we selected based on a number of criteria, and criteria that we could support based on other research that's been conducted in this area. We selected the criteria of 50 and older was in fact the older individual, but then we started thinking about the idea here that what if you have a younger supervisor who's 49 and you have an older worker who's 50? Will that in fact manifest itself so that there is in fact a difference in the perception or expectations and performance of managers. And we obviously came to the conclusion that in fact, 1 year difference is not going to make enough of a difference to change any kinds of perceptions. So what we did is we identified that a 10-year gap is a length of time that is likely to have an impact. And what we in fact then did is we compared and defined older workers as being 50 and older, or in fact, we also looked at older managers, but older workers as being older than 50, and in fact, younger managers and younger workers as in fact being 40 or younger. So this is the kind of example of a project in management or marketing, but it's also possible that this phenomenon would be present in the business analytics side. So this is an example of the kind of research that you might be involved in, but there are lots of other things. In fact, what we find is that most of the students have several ideas, and our task, at least in the beginning, is helping them to decide which of these projects they want to work on for at least a year or perhaps 2 years or something. This is not the kind of thing where it's a one-off paper you write in a couple of 3 weeks. This is something that you really have to dig into, and it takes a year, perhaps even a year and a half. And you really need to like it, because you're going to be spending a lot of time working on this project. And if you don't like it, it'll be much more difficult for you to complete your research if, in fact, you really don't like it. So we work with students to identify something that they want to live with for a year or year and a half, and even perhaps after that. Because once you finish your degree, you don't want to stop there. You want to take all this effort that you've put a year and a half into, a year and a half, and you want to publish it. And so what happens is that when you go through a doctoral program and you graduate, this is not the end of your journey. It's the beginning of your journey. And what we've done is given you the skills and abilities to build on so that you can continue to pursue lifelong learning and apply the concepts that you've learned, but also learn new ones. You need to be intellectually curious if you're going to pursue this kind of career. So I've talked about the typical time for graduation, but let me also talk about some of the things that might slow you down. What might be the obstacles? Well, identifying a research topic. As I mentioned to you earlier, that's one of the things that we do. You, in fact, have a course that is 6 hours in the program. When I designed this program initially, I wanted to work with students to shorten the 1 year time, or certainly 6 months time, that's typical of traditional programs. And in order to do that, I knew we had to have a structured approach to doing that. So we designed courses that help individuals to identify that topic and decide on that topic. And those 6 hours will help you to do that. That course comes at the end of the first year, so that those of you who have ideas that you want to pursue can begin pursuing them in the second year. And those individuals who are able to identify and prioritize are the individuals who, in fact, do graduate in 3 years. But other individuals who take a little bit more time, as I mentioned earlier, generally will graduate within a few months. And actually, the graduation that I'm referring to is the formal graduation where you work, where you walk and we hood you, and at that point you are official. Some other things that are obstacles to a 3-year time completion. Data collection often takes 2 weeks, 4 weeks, it may take 6 weeks. It depends upon how complex your design is. We try to work with students so that we can help them to overcome those problems, but sometimes people don't respond as quickly as, in fact, you would hope that they would do so. So sometimes it's data collection problems. Occasionally it's data analysis and statistical analysis. What I would say is, even though I've mentioned this as an obstacle here, realistically, because of the extensive training that we have on data analysis and statistics, that is very seldom an obstacle in terms of completing. Then finally, the writing of the dissertation. We have exposed you to what it takes to write a dissertation, to design a research program, but it still takes time. And students are often surprised that it takes the time that it does. Writing a chapter could take you 2 or 3 weeks, but then as I mentioned earlier, you need to set that aside and come back later and say, oh, well, I can improve upon that. Doing the data collection, as I pointed out earlier, could take 2 to 4 weeks, but then in fact, you have to write it up. Generally, writing it up is going to take you anywhere from 2 to 3 months. And then probably the biggest challenge, and I still remember the biggest challenge when I was at the University of Florida. I finished everything but the conclusion chapter, and then I said, oh, I haven't, what do I say? You have to learn that in writing a conclusion, it's not about going back and quoting statistics about the percentage of people that answered the question this way or that way. It's about sitting back and thinking about what does all this mean in terms of knowledge creation and in terms of what people have done in the past and what will make it a unique contribution for me. Obviously, I survived that, but not without some frustrations. And then finally, we can control in the program most of these obstacles. We help you, we work with you to achieve those. The thing that you cannot change is you can't change family situations that are uncontrollable. Some individuals have challenges and family changes related to kids. Sometimes it's a significant other, sometimes it's a parent, or maybe even a grandparent. We try to support you, but the only thing that we can do in many situations is to say, we're here if we can help. And when things improve, then we're still here to help you in the long run. We have designed the program then to help you with the 4 in the top. And the bottom one there on career and family changes, we're not able to do that. So let's move ahead to the next one. What is, in fact, scholarly research? We've talked about what theory is, but we haven't talked about research that's scholarly in nature. Well, as it says there, we are creating knowledge, but not just knowledge that you think. One of the first things that people are exposed to in the program is they will answer a question that you propose to them, which is the exchange in the environment. And then they'll give an answer and the professor will say, how do you know that? And in your business environment, you all often are able to get away with expressing your opinion and maybe giving a couple of examples. But in a scholarly research program, you really have to be prepared to go beyond just 1 or 2 examples or say, well, I think this, or here's an example of it. You have to be able to go beyond it and support it with data and information and other researchers. So it's often, in almost all instances, empirical. Increasingly, by the way, empirical is not just survey-related research, but empirical means you collect secondary data, whether it's digital data or whether it's secondary data from many companies who are scraping and accessing information and have databases that will be available, at least some of them in a program like this. Replicable. Well, that means that when you write up your research, you have to disclose enough so that other individuals who want to learn about what you've done and perhaps even duplicate it or extend it can in fact replicate or reproduce it so that they can say, well, I found the same thing or I found something different. And whatever they found, if it's the same thing, they have to expound upon, yes, this is why my research makes a contribution, even though we found the same thing or very similar thing to what you found. And particularly if it's different, then you have to justify that, in fact, my research found something different, but it's still quality research because I have been exposed and I've incorporated something a little bit different, and I'm replicating someone else, or someone else can replicate it and they can test what I have concluded. Analytical, that means, in fact, it's based upon taking data and analyzing it. So you have to think about things in a logical way. and you have to extend those things that you've learned in the past and maybe perhaps just formed an opinion, but you have to cite data, and you have to cite studies, and you have to cite other things that in fact will help you to analyze and understand the problem and draw conclusions that you can defend based upon what you've learned. It's theory driven. We've already talked about that a little bit. We've talked about how it's logical. And finally, what I would say is this is rigorous. As you've heard from the other students, this is a demanding kind of program, probably one of the most difficult things that you've ever done, but it's also something that is a lot of pleasure associated with it. Pleasure of having done something that you didn't think that you could do, but now you have actually done it. You've been successful. And our faculty help you to achieve that success. This is a standard kind of process. Some of you may have been exposed to it. It's a step-by-step process for conducting scholarly research. In this particular situation, we have 7 steps, but others may divide it into to 8 steps, or they may have 5 steps. But it starts with defining your research problem, identifying a theory that you may want to test or examine further, or maybe even adapt, developing a conceptual and ultimately a theoretical model, and then designing the research so that you can have confidence that the things that you conclude can be supported, data collection, data analysis, and then expressing your findings in terms of conclusions and observations, limitations, what are the weaknesses of your research, and then finally, what are the future research opportunities. Your writing assignment is not all of those. We are realistic a little bit about it. Your writing assignment will be to identify a problem and work on it. By the way, we help you when you come to the writing workshop, or excuse me, when you download the materials, you'll find that there are materials for the marketing, individuals interested in marketing, those interested in management, and in business analytics. And we have identified some problems, but probably about 20% of the students will say, well, I like the problem or the situation you've described, but based on my experience, I have this other idea. Can I do that? Well, yes, you can do that. But before you do that, you need to clear that either with myself or an individual in our program who, in fact, can help you to make sure that the topic that you've said that is similar, perhaps, but really different, to help you to understand whether it's possible. So the writing assignment is about first identifying a research problem, then selecting a theory. By the way, this will probably be the first time you've selected a theory, but in fact, you will be able to come up with at least some limited ideas that you can support. We ask you to, in fact, develop a visual model. We call it a conceptual model, which organizes. It helps you to communicate effectively to other individuals what your ideas are. Those are the primary things that you cover in the research proposal. And one little other area, that's about, can you get access to the data? Individuals these days are perhaps interested, or often interested in things like either commission of fraud, or perhaps even ethical issues. And they say, I want to study a particular area. Well, obviously you can't ask an individual if they had ethics that they applied incorrectly, or if they committed fraud. So you have to think, at least initially, if I want to study an area, can I actually collect the data that will enable me to obtain answers that are verifiable, answers that I can support and confirm that my research actually is meaningful and accurate. So what's a problem? Well, a problem doesn't mean that something is bad. Many firms are successful, but the world changes. And when the world changes, you need to adapt. In fact, you need to anticipate those changes and be responsive. When we developed the business analytics program, a number of people said to me, well, you have successful management and marketing. Why don't you just continue with what you're doing? And my response to them was, we are adding the business analytics component because that's an emerging field. And the time that you want to adapt is when you're on top of the program. You don't want to wait till you lose your advantage to the other people in the marketplace. So we define a problem, and you will define a problem, not just if you do have something that's negative, but the difference between where you are and where you would like to be. As we point out here, it's where there's a gap between the reality of today, and what you desire to be. So as I mentioned, this is perhaps an opportunity to talk about improving a current situation. How do you improve your performance? How do you increase your market share? How do you take data and use data to improve decision-making, not only very often in terms of for-profit situations, but for nonprofit kinds of situations? So problems are areas where, by learning something about how to improve or how to eliminate a problem, that you can build on it and contribute something to learning and knowledge and share it with others. Here are some examples of what those research problems are. Everything from, in a marketing area, brand equity, training programs are important. What makes the most effective training program, and how do you get the most out of your teams? That's another thing. Social media websites. What's the best way to communicate with your customers or the individuals that you want to inform about your products? Certainly, increasingly, it's not necessarily TV ads, or it's not necessarily magazines or outdoor signs. They're still important, but it depends upon the market you want your message to be successful with. So what's the best way to communicate with your current customers, but also your potential customers? How can business analytics and the analytics process in general improve your decision-making? That's something that's an important area. Increasingly, business decisions are based on analyzing, well, first really obtaining data, but analyzing it and coming up with the best solution. But ultimately, it's the best solution that will enable business people and really scholars and academics to make the best decision about what suits their needs and solves their problems. Improvement of team building to improve outcomes, and then different leadership styles. There are really literally hundreds, perhaps even thousands of opportunities, but these are just some things that might stimulate ideas for you. We will provide you with a set of scholarly articles that our professors have identified as being relevant. But if those articles are not sufficient, or if you want to go beyond that, those of you that are in academics and already have access will be able to use your own resources, but we can give you access because of a licensing agreement to our library here if you choose to go beyond the resources and the journal articles that we provided you with. What I will say here is that most students, most applicants do not go beyond the articles that in fact we give them, but if you choose to do that, that's fine. We also work with you to understand that you should be relying upon journal articles that are scholarly in nature. Yes, the Wall Street Journal, Business Week, Forbes, those are practical kinds of discussions of business problems, and you can refer to them. But in general, if you have 10 or 12 references, only about 2 at most 3 should be articles that are more practical from a business perspective. This is a scholarly project. You must rely upon scholarly resources. That's what you will be exposed to, and that's what you'll be doing in a PhD program. As I mentioned earlier, this is where you are creating new material. You're making a contribution to a unique area. And the scholarly approach is how you do that. So when you write your research proposal, we ask you to think about the variables that you should be examining in attempting to talk about and discuss and use a logical approach to, in fact, identify what factors are interacting in the situation. So we define those as variables. They must be observable. They must be measurable characteristics. And so one of the things that in business we think about a lot is profit, or we think about sales, or we think about market share. But we also think about concepts that are a little more complex and not as structured, but still measurable. Things like job satisfaction, or things like customer satisfaction, our trust, our commitment, our reputation. These are all issues in the business arena that could be studied and that many of you may study, but these are variables that are measurable and that they're observable. Maybe they're not directly observable, but they are indirectly observable. And reputation is an important consideration when you choose a program like this, but it's also an important consideration for the products and services that you're pursuing otherwise. We ask you to, excuse me. We ask you to take those variables and to divide them into dependent variables and independent variables. Well, what is a dependent variable? A dependent variable is some outcome that you want to be able to explain or predict. So you maybe want to understand what makes individuals, your employees, satisfied with their job, because satisfied employees, in fact, are more productive and help your firm to survive, perhaps. And if survival is not the challenge, as it often is today, then how do you become better? So an outcome is where I start a lot of my applied research. What do I want to understand better? What do I want to be able to predict? What data can I use? Is there data available? One of the areas where we don't have much data available, at least accurate data, is on productivity. Also, if we're talking about predicting profits, firms are very often reluctant to tell you about their profits or their sales. So we measure that indirectly. But when you start the process, you think about what outcome do I want to, in fact, understand better or improve upon and be able to explain and ultimately predict something. In the business analytics side, we're thinking very much about the data that we could use and how we can, in fact, use that data to improve decision making. Once you choose your outcome variable, whatever that outcome might be, we want you to think about what are the factors that influence it? What are the factors that, in fact, have an impact on it and might be able to either improve it or maybe detract from improving it? So you have your dependent or outcome variable, but you have what we call, in a scholarly environment, we have what you call antecedents, factors that come before. Those are independent variables. If those independent variables change, how does the outcome variable change? If I improve trust or if I improve commitment, does that in fact result in higher job satisfaction? Does it result in employees being less likely to search for another job? What are the factors that in fact influence these outcomes? So those are independent variables, and you would want to understand whether those independent variables have a positive impact or whether they maybe have a negative impact. So we think about these problems and relationships in terms of not just variables in general, but variables that are dependent outcome variables versus the other factors that influence them. And you'd have to identify both of them. You'll be exposed to this in the things that you read. And here's a good example. In both the management and the marketing area, we have what we call stakeholder theory. And we've been studying stakeholder theory for about 20 years in both marketing and management. But stakeholder theory is a theory that says the performance of a firm is in fact influenced and impacted by customers, competitors, employees, and shareholders. And in fact, the research has demonstrated and confirmed that if you treat your customers better, that the long run, your performance will be higher, your sales will be higher, your market share will be higher. In terms of competitors, you can't be an island. You must know what your competitors are doing. You must anticipate what they're doing. And hopefully you might be the first mover in some new market, as we are one of the first movers and the earliest universities to be able to offer and in a position to educate people about business analytics. So understanding what's happening in a competitive environment, and if to the extent that you've understood it, then does that affect performance? Employees are a resource of a business, and you must understand and you must communicate effectively and understand employees' problems as well as the business problems. And then finally, if you're a public company, or even if you're not a public company, if you're a family business or a small business, even though family businesses may not have formal shareholders, or entrepreneurs may not have may not have individuals that own share, everybody that works in the company that has some ownership is a shareholder in effect. And so stakeholder theory involves thinking about the major factors that influence performance and how they influence it. And it helps us to understand what can be done and how it can be done so that you are sensitive in the long run as well as in the short run to constantly focusing on performance so that you will survive and thrive in a changing marketplace. Well, here's another idea. We often think about productivity. And one of the things that we're all exposed to these days is new technology. And that new technology may be devices, it may be iPads, it may be iPhones if you're in the Apple ecosystem, but it could be, in fact, other kinds of technology. When we think about technology, for those of you interested in business analytics, we've got new software, we've got evolving software, we have emerging kinds of companies. So when you change anything, many people may be reluctant to accept change. Maybe they've been successful in terms of using existing software, in terms of using existing technology. And then when you ask them to transition to new and different ways of communicating with other employees or communicating with customers, that they're reluctant to do that. So technology implementation is a very important concept. If you implement it correctly, it will help you. If you implement it incorrectly, it will not. By the way, there is a quite high percentage, typically higher than 50% of new technology that's implemented is not implemented as effective as it could be, and really a higher percentage, and it varies from industry to industry and from technology to technology, but easily 30–40% of the technology implementations are actually a failure, a year, perhaps even a 2-year out. And the people have to go back and say, what did I do wrong and how can I do better next time? So a couple of things that influence technology implementation processes are the climate within the organization, and particularly what is the individual or what are the individuals at the top, how do they feel about it? If you have senior management who is accepting of new technology and implementation and supporting, then it helps out. The same thing is true about shared values. If not only the senior level, but the mid-level management, and the employees. Having shared values increases the likelihood that the implementation of technology, which is designed to improve productivity, will in fact be accepted and will help you to be more successful as a company. So in terms of stakeholder orientation or technology acceptance, these are examples of how you visually communicate what we expect people to do. Visually communicate that you're interested, for example, here in understanding or improving productivity. What comes before that? Well, productivity is your dependent or outcome variable, but an antecedent or an independent variable is technology implementation and how you approach it in terms of helping your employees to understand it and accept it and actually implement it. But it's not just one level of an independent variable, it's also often multiple. So you have also a second level of independent variables. So you have in this particular example, the climate and the shared values within the organization that influence technology implementation, and in the long run, productivity. The ultimate outcome variable here is productivity, but we might change that from productivity to performance or market share or sales or meeting your quotas or improving decision making, as we would be thinking about in a business analytics environment. So when you choose and ultimately begin writing your research paper, what you want to do is I would start out with the research problems that in fact you believe that you're interested in, but I would also look at what we are proposing. If you would like, I'm glad to share with you some previous research papers that have been prepared that have been successful in having people admitted. By the way, one of the things I would tell you is I'm always surprised at the people who don't follow directions. If you don't follow the directions that we give you, I won't say that you won't be admitted, but I will say this, that it will impact us in terms of what's happened. These instructions are fairly straightforward. So I just advise you to be very careful to make sure that you've checked all the boxes that we've asked you to check. We want you to explain the problem, why it's important, and how it makes, at least in your opinion and with your limited knowledge, how it makes a contribution to knowledge, why it's unique and different, and it's going to help others to do a better job in their particular situation. You want to talk about what is known about the problem. You'll use the journal articles that we provide you, or perhaps some that you have access to describe what you know about the problem. Summarize what you've learned from studying and reading other articles, and in fact, do that in a way that communicates effectively what you do know about the problem based upon what others have addressed in the past. Refine the problem, list your independent and dependent variables, come up with hypotheses, and ultimately develop a conceptual model. I've sent you a couple of chapters from one of my books, and those chapters should help you to learn a little bit more. If you read them, or I say I've sent you, they're available if you actually access material. You're able to download them. They define how to develop a conceptual and theoretical model. They actually define what the difference is between a conceptual and a theoretical problem. And they give you a little background. They also give you some background in terms of a literature review. And the literature review is basically thinking about and referencing previous work and writing it up in a short overview. As I'll say in a minute later, this paper is about 16 to 18 pages, and you summarize the various topics in that and write on it. Generally, it's about one-page intro, which introduces your problem and describes it briefly. The background of the problem where you summarize the previous research is probably going to be about 3 to 5 pages long, maybe a little bit more. And then you have your theoretical model, and you'll have an explanation of the theoretical model. You'll identify hypotheses, and then ultimately suggest some ideas for data collection. This area is not where we expect you to do much, but we want you to think about it. There are problems which there is no data available for. So we simply want you to say, well, here's where I think I could get the data. Many of the people who are working in environment have access to data in their company. And in fact, you met, if you were in the earlier session, Pam, who works in the missile area, she was able to get access to a government agency that she's worked with, and they answered surveys for her. But you need to think about the possibilities of how you can get data. A very critical element in this process is the ability to obtain data that's actually quality data, that's reliable, that's valid, and ultimately will be useful in helping you to draw your conclusions. So this is your realistic job preview, the research proposal, the writing of it, and you should think about it a lot. Think about it a lot, write it, set it aside, come back to it, maybe set it aside a second time, and when you feel comfortable with it, then in fact, submit it. You have to list your scholarly references at the end. So this is another process that you'll need to do. And then when you've met the requirements, then we want you to submit it. I've summarized here the requirements and the timelines. What I would say is some individuals submit theirs by early December. In the past, we were able to process those and give people a response before Christmas. This year, because of the virus situation, we are finishing up, as many universities are, before Thanksgiving. So if in fact you're able to finish it before Christmas, then we will try. But generally speaking, we are able to review and set up an interview within about 2 weeks of when people submit it. We want you to submit it in Microsoft Word format, Arial 12-point font, and submit it electronically to this address, Lisa Williams at South Alabama. We don't need a hard copy. We want to save some trees and some other resources out there. So let's see. We have questions. If you have questions and I can, in fact, answer them, I will. If I can't, then I will get back to you later. Let me see. All right, if I can. Okay. Stop share. Okay, there we go. Okay. I'm getting pretty good at this, but like all of us, it's a transition, and I've been doing this 50 years. So, and it's still fun, by the way. So I hope you have a long and successful career like I've had. I see that you're all on mute, or most of you are. If you have a question, or if there's something that you think I might be able to answer, then fire away.
Good morning, Dr. Hare. How are you doing?
I'm fine.
Are you okay with an abstract as part of the introduction?
Am I okay with an abstract? Well, yes, you can add an abstract, but you really need to have more detail than that, because often an abstract is not long enough to, in fact, enable you to express what your thoughts are. So an abstract in itself is not sufficient for the introduction.
Okay. Okay, that's all the question I have. But can I include just a paragraph of an abstract and then go into the introduction as well, or just expand on it?
Absolutely. An abstract at the beginning that summarizes briefly what your idea and your direction is, fine with me.
Okay, thank you very much. This is Emmanuel Finney, by the way.
I can see your name on the screen, Emmanuel. Glad to talk to you.
Okay.
We've gone back and forth via email. But now I don't see you, but I see your name.
I have one more question. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I chose marketing as my concentration, but now I want to lean more towards business analytics. Is that possible?
Yes, I mean, what I would say is there are some students who end up changing in this process. You know, once you get into it, you learn a little bit about it. But sure, at this point, it's fine to switch. By the way, marketing is fun. I've been doing it a long time, although I drifted into the quantitative side, but sure. And obviously, I'm very interested in the business analytics side. I have another new book coming out, which is Essentials of Marketing Analytics. And I tell you, I've really enjoyed evolving in the last couple of years. By the way, with some former students who are my co-authors on this new book, into the field of marketing analytics. So we feel like we're going to have a good program. And if you end up in the program on the business analytics side, you know, this is an emerging area. And if you're interested, which I think many of you are, in making the transition, Today, there are currently very few universities who, quote, have a business analytics department. So if you're going into a college of business, as if you make that transition, most of you will, what we'll try to work with you to do is to understand, in fact, where you might fit in a college of business in terms of either the traditional departments like marketing or management or quantitative methods or finance or accounting or whatever, because it's most likely that if you make this transition in the next 3 or 4 years, which, you know, some of you will, that we still will not have many, quote, business analytics departments in the College of Business. So we'll have to work with you and counsel you to which area that you can find a home in and actually apply. And that will make you, from a career perspective and an academic perspective, that will make you more likely to find the job that you want if you can find a home in one of the traditional departments in the College of Business.
Thank you.
Okay. If you want to talk, you need to unmute.
Okay, Dr. Hare, this is Albert Carter. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks.
Great. You mentioned earlier that there were specific topics that we needed to focus our paper on. Where do we need to find those specific topics?
Okay, Albert, have you paid your fee yet?
Yeah, yes, sir. I have downloaded the material.
Okay, you've downloaded the material, and there are, I think, 3 marketing areas. There's 2 management, and then there's a more general business one. And
Right.
each of those, there is a research question that's posed. That, I think, and we hope, by the way, will stimulate some initial ideas.
Okay.
But if you want to ask questions about that, send me an email, or, you know, I'm glad to share with you my phone number, which is a mobile phone. I live with it at home, unfortunately.
I have it. We spoke over the summer back in June.
So feel free to get in touch with me. If you're having a little trouble, I'll try to help you as best I can to select from what is more of a general kind of topic. But if I can't answer your questions, then I'll call on some of our other faculty resources.
Okay. My academic background, my academic background is in operations management, and that's the track that I would like to try to stay on. Do you recommend the business analytics or the management side of things?
Actually, what I would say is I would recommend marketing or, in fact, business analytics. But even if you're in business analytics, you need another specific area. What I would tell you is the research I've done on this and the reading that I've done on it indicates that currently about 70% of all the applications of analytics are in the field of marketing. There's also a lot of data in that area. So it is a good area to apply in. A lot of it really depends upon what your focus is, whether it's pure business analytics or whether you want to develop an applied side. For better or for worse, and I give the management people a hard time, even though I have a minor in management. The management people are not as quick to adapt. So at least in the early years, a combination of business analytics and management, in my opinion, and I would suggest to you that you perhaps talk with others, and we'll be glad to get some of the management people here to talk with you. That management, I don't think, will have opportunities as early as an applied area within business analytics as will marketing. So that's my answer. Hope that answers.
Joe.
Thank you.
Joe, can I speak real quick?
Sure. Oh, hey, Dr.
Hey.
Hey, it's great. I didn't know you were going to be able to join us.
Yes, actually, I was here for both sessions. I've just been very quiet.
Oh, okay.
Which isn't usual. But hi, everyone. I'm Gwendolyn Pennywell. I am on the Faculty of Finance, and I work with the PhD program. I work closely with Joe from an administrative standpoint. Currently, I'm the interim associate dean. So I would be the one you will contact if you have any administrative type questions of getting registered for courses, or logistics of getting to campus, making sure infrastructure is in place for your weekend residencies. But I wanted to speak on Albert's question. Muskan sent you a link. When you go into the folders, the way they have currently been set up, there are 4 folders. One folder is, I think, listed like general. That is for everyone, and that has all of your basic information that Joe mentioned as far as how do you lay out the format, how do you pose a research question, all of the general information that he has discussed. And then there is a folder for each concentration. So you choose the concentration that you're interested in, and feel free to look at all of them as you decide what you want to use to write your paper. And then within that folder, there are also papers that should, in their title, be pretty specific of what that file is about. And it will include the articles, and it will include the document that he mentioned that has the questions that you can use. So if you, as you go through that information, have any questions about the way it's laid out, please feel free to reach out to me. My email address is gpennywell@southalabama.edu. If you have any questions about the information that it contains and what it means, then definitely, by all means, reach out to Joe Hare.
Okay. Any other questions from anyone?
Yes.
Hi,
My
Dr.
name
Joe.
is Dawn Golden. And you mentioned that not following directions is one way to have an application not considered. What are some other factors that would have you not particularly interested in a student?
Well, I'm not sure whether English is your first language or not, but what I would say to you is that it's important whether it's your first language or your second or your fifth or whatever, that you write in English, because scholarly publications are in English. Transitioning to that area where probably 80 or 90% of the resources are in English. And you will need to be successful in this field to write in English. And so get some help if it's your second language, or some of the people who it's their first language are not good writers. So I simply advise you to have a colleague, or have maybe even a specialist reread, make sure that your grammar and your spelling is correct. It's surprising to me that individuals submit papers with incorrect spelling. It doesn't mean you don't, sometimes make mistakes, but just go over. And that's why I advise you to write it and set it aside and come back. Be very careful about writing it. Have a topic sentence, support that topic sentence, have paragraphs, have subheadings, something that enables us to easily review and understand what your problem is and what you propose to study, and how it will, in fact, enable you to provide something in a limited basis, how it will enable you to provide something above and beyond the literature that we've shared with you or the things that you may have already learned. So it's the format, it's the follow directions, it's writing in proper English, because you're going to need to do that if you're in an academic career. And so those are the things that most often end up being the reason that people, and if they send something to me, then I generally try to help them, but some of them follow my guidance or the guidance of the other professors that we have look at it, and they're able to come back with a revised one. But just be careful. This written proposal is, as I think I mentioned this earlier, the written proposal is about 50% of the weight of the decision of who gets admitted. And in fact, if your proposal is not acceptable, you will not be asked for an interview. So do people ever not make it the first year and come back the second year? Yes, that happens. We try not to say, well, we didn't like it, we don't want to talk to you again. I mean, we're trying to teach you a little bit right on the front end, but this is a very important admission criterion, and you need to take it seriously. And my wife would give me a hard time saying you're lecturing to them too much, but I'm trying to communicate to you that this is an important something that you take seriously, and not only take seriously because we look at it and rely on it heavily, but to take seriously because this exercise is what a scholarly career is about. And if you learn that you don't like it, or you don't enjoy it, or maybe even find it exciting, then this is a good way for not only for you to learn, but for us to learn about you. So this is a joint project, and that's why I'm trying to emphasize to you that you take it seriously.
And to add to Joe's point, when you get to that point, and he's the quintessential researcher, and that's what he's going to be focusing on. But what I want to mention is we've got to get you to that point. So you also need to make sure when you go into WebAdmit, that portal for your application, that you do all of those steps, because if I don't have a completed application, I can't then transfer that information to Joe so that the team can start reviewing your papers. So that completed application includes making sure you order those transcripts. Now, there have been some leeway with COVID, but please make sure you get those transcripts on order as quickly as possible. Make sure that you request those letters of recommendation and that you fill out that application, because if I don't have those things, I cannot move to the next step, which is the completed application that would then go to Joe and the team for review. And if you have any questions with that applications portion, please once again reach out to me.
Thank you both.
Okay, Don, if I can't hear you.
I was saying thank you both.
Oh, okay.
Hi, Dr. Joe. This is Vakas. My concentration is marketing. I just want to ask about the variable types. You just mentioned the dependent and independent variable. While we are making our proposal, we can also choose mediator or moderator variable as well, because I have heard that these are also the types of variables.
The answer to that is yes. You could include a mediator or a moderator, but in fact, most individuals have not been exposed to that concept. And so we don't necessarily think that we would require you to have included a mediator or moderator, but that would certainly demonstrate that you have a level of knowledge beyond the basics. We spend a good deal of time on mediators and moderators in your research design courses. And what I would tell you is that it's an important concept, but we're not expecting you to be up to speed on that in writing this proposal.
But if we write it, but if we work on that, then it will be an added advantage during our admission. Am I right?
Well, you know, what you're asking, is it going to be an added advantage? Well, perhaps it will impress us, but what I would say is I don't want to give the impression that everyone needs to have a mediator or moderator to be successful. Yes, it shows that your background and your foundation, relatively speaking, is higher, but I don't want the others to feel like they need to go study about mediators and moderators in order to be admitted to our program.
All right, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey, Dr. Hare. Hello and hello to potential 2024 cohort members. My name's, can you hear me okay?
Yes, yes, Philip, I hear you fine. Thank you.
Right. So I'm a call center entrepreneur, sort of obsessed with reducing unwelcome telemarketing calls through analytics and AI. As analytics moves from descriptive and predictive to prescriptive, you know, with the help of big data and secondary data, you know, AI is becoming really, really important in the world. Can you elaborate on what you're going to do to prepare us for a business world driven by AI?
Well, what I would tell you is that is an important component, that certainly the prescriptive component as well as the AI component interacting will be an element. We don't have a separate entire course on analytics, but we do incorporate that in the program. By the way, the analytics component and the artificial intelligence is not what you'll get exposed to probably in the first semesters. The way it's designed, you're going to be obtaining your exposure to research techniques, but later on it will in fact be incorporated, because clearly the big data analytics and the business analytics and the prescriptive components are not as theoretically driven in a data analytics component. The data analytics component, as you and I both know, and I'm sure some of these others, is more about identifying patterns and relationships that enable you to predict. And of course, you have that additional layer of artificial intelligence, because the front part of data analytics and business analytics really is about combining machine learning with later on the involvement of humans. And of course, the third element there is not only the machine learning where you apply it to the data, but you combine it with artificial intelligence, so that we hope that the artificial intelligence that we have will facilitate identification of better decision-making approaches that can integrate with the humans in the process. So it certainly is an element in the program, but also what I would caution you about is this is an evolving field. So what we've incorporated now is what we feel based upon what we've solicited in terms of designing the program from individuals who are already active in the program, active in the field. But, you know, there are going to be things that emerge in the next couple of years while you're in the program. And so we're going to try to evolve as much as possible. And that's one of the elements also where our advantage of having global scholars is that if something changes in the next year, then we're going to invite someone else who maybe was responsible for those changes to come and talk with you and visit with you. So I can't tell you that we know everything about it. I don't think there's anybody that knows everything about it, because it's such a new and emerging field. But we are open to change, and as things evolve, we'll try to ensure that you, in fact, are exposed to and feel prepared, at least in terms of being knowledgeable about it, but probably not necessarily being an expert in it, because it's debatable about what an expert really is in business analytics today, because it's just changing so quickly.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Hare. You really put that one to rest. I have one other sort of personal question for you. I'm a fan of you, your work. Do you have plans to retire? Can we count on you for the next 3 years?
Well, put it this way. I figure I'm going to die lecturing.
Yeah. Okay.
So, you know, I have no plans to retire. I've been fortunate that my health has been good. They have been very good with me here about enabling me to stay away from COVID. And I hope I'm going to be successful. My wife and I of 50 some years unfortunately, we've quarantined as much as possible. So, you know, keep your fingers crossed, I would say. I think I've got another 10 years, at least I hope I do.
Thank you, Dr. Herr. That's all.
But by the way, one of the things is I do have a transition program. I'm trying to avoid it, but you know, I know that the risks are there. And so I've been working to train individuals to backfill. They won't be as good as me. No, I'm just kidding with you. But you know, we recognize that it doesn't matter whether, you know, you have someone like me who is my age and has the track record I do. It could be me, or it could be someone else who encounter situations with a virus. You could have an automobile accident or whatever. So we try to plan for it, but I have no plans to retire. I'm having too much fun working with people, hopefully maybe like you.
Thanks, Dr. Herr. I appreciate that. That's all I had.
Hi, Dr. Here. This is Joseph Mombari. I have a question. I'm interested in natural language processing, and for the independent variable, can I tokenize like the comments and use them as independent variable?
What I would say is that's not a field that I know a lot about, but generally speaking, we welcome and we support if you want to be a little bit of creative or divert. If you're going to choose an independent variable that's not necessarily in some of the resources that we provide you, what I would ask you to do is that you need to incorporate references, scholarly references and sources that will support the fact that the independent variable that you choose is in fact a legitimate independent variable, and there is sufficient logical and theoretical and practical and scholarly support for your identifying it. So don't just, you know, grab something and say, oh, I think maybe this might be useful. It might be a starting point, but if you're going to have as a starting point, then you need to support it by saying, you know, John Smith or Fred Reynolds or someone like that has actually looked at this, or at minimum, if they haven't looked at it, then based on their experience and their current knowledge set, that they believe it might be a useful independent variable. So like everything that we do in a program like that, I'm going to ask, and I would expect you to support, you know, the answer to how do you know that? And when, you know, it doesn't necessarily mean I'm challenging you. I'm just simply saying that when you select something or you go in a particular direction, we want it to be well-founded in terms of the fundamentals, so that it's not really a guess. It is a judgment based at least on some sufficient knowledge to enable you to include it as an independent variable.
Thank you.
Joe, I have received a question about housing. And so if you don't mind, I'll just speak to that for a minute. The students for their residency are responsible for choosing their housing and making arrangements for their housing. I will say there is a hotel that is directly across the street from the university that a lot of students tend to stay, and I can get that information for you. The other thing is many of the cohorts will get together and will request a block of rooms, so that will help minimize the cost. But because they're able to negotiate a multi-room rate, and what I can do is I will reach out to some of the other cohorts to see how they have handled lodging and residency in the past, and I can get a list of the places that they've used and the cost range that they have as you try to prepare what your requirements will be from a housing cost. And what I'll do is I'll get that to Joe, and I'll also put together a sheet, and I will put it into the workshop materials. So I'll add another folder or another document that says housing that will give you the information that I have been able to gather.
Yeah, let me give a specific there. From my understanding and talking with past students, they've been able to negotiate a rate down to about $70 to $75 a night. That typically includes some breakfast, although we also do provide breakfast here. They go and shop around. So most of them stay in the same hotel, but occasionally we have some people who like to use Airbnb. And we also have had a couple of students who have actually bought a condo as an investment. So the bulk of them, though, will get together and negotiate. And generally, your cohort will talk with, and we put you in touch with former students on how that process starts. And then once it starts, they develop something on their own. We're here to help them, but generally they learn quickly, and they do it as a cohort so that they can not only be staying in an environment where they see their friends, but they also end up going back and study some together at night. I do know one of the things is that the motels they tend to choose do have business kinds of facilities so that they're available, and they usually have a separate room that they're able to reserve for evenings when they may want to get together. Any other questions?
Dr. Hare, this is Emmanuel. I just wanted to confirm that you want us to suggest ideas for data collection and not necessarily test our data.
No, you do not need to test your data. We just want you to.
I'm sorry, I just want to make a quick point. The reason I ask is because our suggestions may not necessarily be consistent with our findings or the conclusion. And so I don't, it's just, I was just just wanted a little more information about that.
Okay, well, what I would say is that section is just a general situation where you reflect on and say, well, I believe that this is the group that would be knowledgeable informants about my problem. I believe it's possible. Some people would say I'm active on LinkedIn or some other message boards, and these are groups where they feel like they could access them. Otherwise, it's just a brief overview of these are the individuals that if you choose to do a survey, that in fact you might be able to get the data with a general description. If you're in the analytics side, you might in fact identify a database or some approach to obtaining digital data. That's a little bit different than a survey where you need to talk to individuals, but it's an opportunity for you to simply reflect on and say, here's the data I need, here's the sample I need. Based upon the information that I currently have, I believe that in fact I will be able to get that data. And so that's a limited one. What I would tell you also, because some of you have asked, if we feel that your description of access to the data is perhaps not realistic, then we might share with you, or in the interview, we might ask you to defend it a little bit more. But your description of the availability of the data of the overall research proposal, that's not something that typically would result in a decision for you not to be admitted. It's more like an opportunity for you to demonstrate that you have thought about it and that you believe that you can obtain the data, and here's how you think you could obtain it. And we may talk about it, but in general, this is more about your ability to review the journal articles, to reflect on it, to identify and describe the relationships between the independent and dependent variables, and to actually just demonstrate how the data either is already available or potentially and likely could be available to help you to answer the research question that you're proposing to study.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Thank you.
Hi, Dr. Hare, this is Philip Holberg again. I just wanted to say thank you to you and faculty and staff for doing this for us all. I found it really helpful. I have one more question. For students like myself who are choosing your program in lieu of a traditional 5-year program where, you know, I'd be funded and doing TA stuff, what kind of engagements could I do with that extra time? For me, I don't have family, I don't have kids. This would be a full-time pursuit. You know, are there teaching assistantships? You know, in what other ways could I engage with the program that might be a little more involved? Does that make sense?
Yeah, actually it does. And, you know, those people would be in the group that end up because of, let's say, more free time than many other individuals who are working full-time. Those are the individuals that typically would early on identify a professor that has common interests, and you would probably get started on a research project early. One of the students that I have had the pleasure of working with, we have together, he's published 4 journal articles. 3 of them he co-authored with me and some of the other global scholars and scholars in the program. I would say, frankly, he's an outlier, but he has more time and he is also highly motivated. So one of the things that for someone like yourself with more time is that you could have the opportunity to begin your research journey and to spend more time on it. A second thing that I would say is that some of the students are teaching online these days. And so we could possibly identify for some opportunities with other universities for you to teach. Occasionally within the program, I think that I've been here 5 years now. We've employed maybe 4 or 5 individuals on an occasional basis within our college, but on a routine basis, that doesn't happen necessarily because the staff is already in place, but sometimes we have a faculty member who is on, you know, maybe on leave to a Fulbright scholarship or something, and we need to have a temporary fill-in, or we have you know, 100 people register for a class that accommodates only 20 or 30, and we'll open an extra section. So for an individual like yourself who has more time and doesn't have commitments to other individuals, then we would try to work with you to create some opportunities that what we would hope would be would enable you to strengthen your skills and strengthen your knowledge so that when you hit the market and are looking for a job, you would be in a strong position to find a job.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And again, thanks to the faculty and staff for doing this for us all.
Yeah. By the way, I'm not the only one that co-authors with people, and obviously I have limited time. We currently have 56 students in our program, and that was before the business analytics. So we're going to have obviously a little bit more with the addition of that. But my plate tends to be full all the time. But fortunately, and as you would expect, people graduate and move on, and it opens up. But I'm not the only one that works with students. All of our other faculty work with students on projects. And of course, it's an opportunity for you to learn, but it's an opportunity for them to learn. The global scholars that we're involved with also are involved on occasion. So all I can say is that we have had individuals like yourself with more time than others. Certainly that puts you in an advantage to make sure you graduate in the 3-year time frame. But it also, we try to accommodate those individuals so that we help them to pursue their research and upon graduation to have some, you know, demonstrated skills and success in not only the knowledge that they gained in our program, but also perhaps in teaching or certainly in research, which is an important component of an academic career.
Thank you.
So Joe, I'm also monitoring the chat to make sure we capture all the questions, and there are a couple of things that have come up. Now, what is the minimum requirement for work experience? I want to make sure I don't give incorrect information.
Okay, the minimum requirement is 5 years, but 5 years is in fact, it's an arbitrary number. Have we always had 5 years? I think maybe we had a little flexibility, but in general, our typical years of experience tend to be 7 to 10 years. But it needs to be meaningful. It needs to be meaningful experience. I mean, a lot of people have had part-time or short-term experiences working. Some of it's internships. Generally speaking, we evaluate and we consider employment to be full-time employment in a job which is leading to, substantial business experience.
Okay, so based on that, my suggestion to the person who reached out with 5 to 6 years of across general business sectors, please go ahead and fill in your application, turn in your application. We'll take a look at it. And that is one of the things that through the, if you get to the interview process and in that discussion, because the concern that she has, Joe, is that because her experience is not as lengthy as some of the others applicants, that she would be at a disadvantage. That's one of the things that the interview process helps to do. Once we understand through that interview process, everyone that we accept into the program, we accept people we feel have a very good chance of making it through the program. So yes, you may not have as much job experience that you can draw on in your discussions, but I don't think it will make you disadvantaged to the fact that you could not complete the program. So I would not let that length of experience deter me from submitting an application.
Yeah, particularly if you're close. For example, let's say that you currently have 4.5 years and you'll finish another 6 months, but between now and when you actually begin the program, if you're in that situation, then you need to contact one or more of us, and we'll visit with you after we have sufficient information in hand to give you more than just a general question or general answer to your question.
Okay, there was a question about, is there a requirement for a personal statement in addition to the research paper? Yes, the personal statement is a part of the application process, and the personal statement is only 1 to 2 pages that indicates why you've decided to pursue this degree and specifically why you've chosen South. And then the research paper, as Joe has discussed today, is designed to give us insight into your theoretical capabilities. There is a question about someone who received an MBA over 20 years ago and have not kept in touch with professors. That is not a problem. You do not have to have for your letters of recommendation. If you do have academic contacts, that is great. It is not a requirement for academic contacts. What we're looking for in your letters of recommendation are 3 people who can give us insight into your work ethic, into your interest, and into your propensity or your ability to complete the program. So it can be people you've worked with, it can be people you've worked for, it can be people who know you in an academic setting. So far, that's all I see in chat.
Okay. Anyone else something come to mind?
Hi, this is Amit. Can you guys hear me?
I hear you.
Okay. I'm sorry. I think I joined this session a little late. I'm calling from Dallas, Texas. So I kind of got the timing mixed up. So I missed the first half of the session. So I was wondering if
Hamid, I'm sorry, technology, you're breaking up. If you could write that in the chat component, then I want to make sure that I fully understand your question. And I'm looking at the chat function now. If you could type it in there, it would be easier for me to make sure that I give you an accurate answer. Oh.
Miss. I think he means miss the first
I
half.
know you
Oh, I'm
missed the
sorry.
first.
I missed. I'm so
Hey, life is too challenging not to have some fun occasionally.
I'm so sorry. Okay. So I missed the first half of this session, and I was wondering, I see that the session is being recorded.
Yes,
But I was
it has been recorded, and you can go back and listen to it as many times as you want. And it's not only this session, but in case you didn't know it, Hamid, we had a little over a 1 hour session before where several of the faculty spoke, and then we had several students who also shared their perspective. So you should access that as well. It's called an information session.
Okay. Thank you so much. My second question is, even though I'm still an applicant, if I'm working on a proposal, is it likely that I can reach out to maybe a faculty that is working in that field?
Yes, it's fine for you to identify someone who might be a resource, but what we ask you in the formal written description of the proposal is that we ask you to identify that on the front end and simply say, I talked to Professor Sam Smith, and he helped me or she helped me to better understand the nature of this and gave me some guidance. But in the final analysis, this is my work.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Last question and then so regarding the work experience, I've been in the academia for about a decade. I'm not sure if that counts since this is a business program. So would my teaching experience be relevant? Because I have more teaching experience than corporate experience.
What I would say is that we do in fact count academic experience, but it should be a combination then of academic and at least some business experience. The disadvantage of individuals who haven't had business experience is that it's more difficult for them to identify problems or opportunities, however you want to look at it, to investigate as part of their research. And so having had some, at least even limited business experience in combination with an academic appointment always enables you to increase the likelihood that you can identify a topic to do your doctoral research on in a short period of time and still meet the completion dates that you are hoping to achieve, as well as we're hoping that you achieve them.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We appreciate all of you participating. We are here to help you make this decision. It's an important decision. We feel like we have a program that has worked well for a number of years, but we're always looking at ways on how we can improve. We have learned something from our experience in being forced to use Zoom. And when I say forced, it's not like we didn't want to, but prior to the virus, we were in person and on a more limited basis in between classes. We exchange ideas and thoughts, but going forward, everything will be recorded, and students have already begun telling us that it's great to have in-person classes, but it's also great to have access to those classes afterwards in a recording environment. It's particularly true because some students have not yet developed the ability to take fewer notes. And so they end up writing a lot of time notes and then missing concepts that are being talked about in class. So the nice thing about recording availability is that students can take fewer notes in the in-person classes, and then they can go back and fill in the gaps in their notes later on by revisiting those recordings and preparing better for the next classes. Thank you. We're going to sign off. We're here. Hope you have a good day, and get in touch with us if we can help.
One last thing, Joe. I apologize. I'd had a private question on diversity, and I just wanted to mention we also work with PhD Project, and PhD Project is designed to help students who are from underrepresented groups, which includes African American, Native American, and Hispanic American, and they provide resources for various conferences, and they also provide additional networking opportunities. So for the students who join our program, we automatically submit your name to PhD Project so that you can become a part of that organization as well.
Okay. Can you send us an email on, regarding the PhD project?
Yes, but the location is phdproject.com, and it will have all of the information. I'll put that in the chat.
Okay. Thank you so much.
So Joe, before you sign off, if you give me 1 second to put that into the chat.
Yep, be glad to do that.
Hey, this is Terrence. Quick question for the business analytic research proposal. Is that the final one, or we're good? Because I saw 2 versions out there on the share.
You saw 2 versions?
There was one, the initial, and then there was a revised. So I'm not sure which one. I'm assuming that the revised was the final one.
Okay, honestly, I thought the revised one was the final. I will check. We did have an initial one. Maybe I sent that to you early on because, Terrence, I remember that we've communicated several times, but we do now have a final one with, I think, 11 or 12 articles and a research question. But I will check what's online now to make sure it's the final one.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, and it may be phdproject.org. .com should send you to .org.
Okay, thanks again. I'm going to end the session. Have a good day.
Have a good one. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.